Hi there, this is Juandano here with research method now. First I'm going to talk about types of research, and then I'm going to proceed to how to find out or how to find or how to determine research problems. Let's continue with my slides here. So this is the topic, research technique. This is my class. So, okay. This is our topic, types of research and finding research problems. Okay. First of all, I'm going to define research. So research is a set of systematic procedures. Here the word systematic is emphasized. Yeah, systematic procedures that are conducted to generate answers to a certain problem. So basically, you will do a systematic procedures. Systematic means you have steps to follow. It's not just haphazard. It's not just random, but systematic. Yes, a set of or a series of steps which are rigid and proceduralized. That's systematic. And then you do that in order to come to an answer or answers to your research problems. Okay? And the second feature is that it is empirical. Empirical means it is based on data taken from actual text or actual observation. So research is not an imaginative thing. It's not an imaginative work. You just don't fancy or imagine things, but you collect real data from real life, from real subjects, or you observe real objects, and then you analyze the data. That is empirical. It's not fictional, it's not imaginative, but it is based on real data. Okay, so that's research. Let's continue to the types of research. You have a descriptive. Descriptive research simply describes a phenomenon or a condition of a community or language features of a novel or a speech or a movie or any other kind of discourse. Or you can also describe the proficiency of certain groups of students, etc. So the main aim of descriptive research is to describe condition of something, describe features of a novel, describe conditions of proficiency or characteristics of a group of people or a group of students. That is the main aim of a descriptive research. It simply describes. For example, you can conduct a research about the speech acts of Pak Jokowi's speech. You look at his speech and then you identify and describe the speech acts. Or you can also describe the TOEFL scores of management students at Machung. That's also a description of their TOEFL scores, TOEFL abilities, like English language proficiency. Simply to describe something. That is descriptive. Okay. Now under descriptive, you have what is called correlation, what is called survey, and also case study. We are going to study this further, but here I would like to give the essence of a correlation. Correlation is if you want to know whether students with high IPK or high GPA also scores high on TOEIC test. That's correlation. You want to know if these scores are high, is that followed by the high scores on another measure or another variable. That's correlation. Again, we are going to discuss this further in the next chapter. Survey is if you want to find the English language proficiency of Mandarin students at Machung. That's an example. Survey means describing certain characteristics or certain features of a community, and then analyze the data, and then you come to the conclusion. So this is the characteristics of that group. In this case, if you want to describe the English language proficiency of Mandarin students, then that's it. You test them and then you describe the scores. The scores reflect their English language proficiency at Mahjong only. Okay, that's survey. Yeah. This will lead to the concept of sampling, which we are going to discuss further later. Yeah. And then in case study is if you investigate one or two respondents or a limited number of entities in depth. Remember that the keyword here is in depth. In depth means that it's not just a simple scanning or a simple observation, 1 or 2 hours and that's over. That's not a case study. A case study has to be deep. By deep, I mean it uses many instruments. For example, observation, interviews, tests, and questionnaires. Yeah, you use all of them or some of them to gather more and more data. The more data you gain, the deeper your case study is, to reveal what is actually inside that object or that particular community. Yeah, that's a case study. A case study is also characterized by a long period of time. So as I said before, it's not a case study if you go to a certain community, distribute questionnaires and that's it. That's not a case study. Yeah. Case study has to be conducted within a long period of time, probably a semester, 2 semesters, yeah, or even a year. Yeah, that's case study. Okay. Now another type of research is confirmatory. Confirmatory means it aims to verify or it aims to test or confirm a theory. If you are interested in knowing whether the theory is true or not, then you conduct a confirmatory research. Yeah. Most likely, it will use what we call experimental design. Experimental design. But we are going to study this later. Okay. So, for example, you want to confirm whether a theory called multimodal theory holds true for Mahjong students. Now, in this case, you want to test whether the theory is true among Mahjong students. And then you will need sampling. Sampling means taking some people, only some people, from a larger group of people. The larger group of people is called population, and the smaller group of which it is part is called sample. And the act of determining the sample from the population, or the act of taking the sample from the population, is called sampling. It's the act of finding a small number of people from the population to which they belong. That's called sampling. Yeah. But again, we are going to study sampling in the later chapter. Yeah. And most likely, you will need an experimental design. Yeah. Experimental design is basically you divide 2 groups into 2 subgroups. Yeah. Say, for example, group A and group B. In group A, you give a certain treatment, and in group B, you just leave it as it is. And then at the end of a period, for example, at the end of a semester or at the end of an academic year, you run a test for both of the groups, and then you compare which one scores higher. And that's experimental design. Again, we are going to discuss this later. Yeah. Okay, another type of research is what we call inferential. Inferential aims to generalize from a small group of people, or objects, to a larger group of people. Again, this is sampling. Yeah. This involves sampling. And again, it uses experimental design, or it uses survey research. Okay. So, for example, you observe that 25 out of 150 FPS students score average on TOEIC. Yeah, you happen to find out if that 25 students only score average on TOEIC. Yeah. Then you can say, you can generalize that 150 FPS students must also score more or less average on TOEIC. That's the act of inferring. The act of inferring from the 25 to the 150. Yeah. Here the 25 students are part of the larger group, which is 150 FPS students. So this is inferential. This is often contrasted to descriptive. In descriptive research, you do not bother with inferring. You do not bother with generalizing. You simply describe, and that's it. That's the description that you come up with. After collecting the data, after analyzing the data, then you come up with a description. But in inferential, after you analyze the data, and then you infer that, okay, if I find a certain trait here, if I find a certain characteristic here in a smaller group, then I can generalize this to the larger group or to the population. That is what is called generalizing, and it works with inferential research. Okay, this will be important when you conduct your own thesis later. Yeah. Okay, now moving on to the next subtopic, which is how to find research problem. Yeah. Again, let me remind you that this refers to my book entitled Meneliti Itu Tidak Sulit, published in 2015, Chapter 1. If you read Chapter 1, you'll find there a description of how to find research problems. So you'd better read it. Yeah, you have to read it in order to make sense of whatever I'm delivering here, whatever I'm explaining here. Okay, so first is curiosity. If you are curious, then chances are that it is easier for you to find a research problem because you are curious. Yeah. Is there any relationship between students' reading habits and their attitude? You are curious about this. You want to know, is there any relationship between students' reading habits, yeah, and their attitude? That's the start of a research problem. Or you wonder, how do good students manage their studying? You want to find out what strategies that they use in order to be successful in their studying. That's also a research problem. Okay, so curiosity is one of the ways. The other one is you can read journal articles. This is a habit which I'm going to encourage you to do during this research technique. Well, in fact, reading journal articles is very important for scholars like you. When you read journal articles, you might find areas which have not been explored by the researcher. Yeah, say, for example, you read a certain journal discussing the habit of white students in America University, and then you wonder, is what happens with non-white students? For example, you are wondering whether the same finding also applies to black students or to other minority groups or to Asian students. And then you can do research among this group of people or group of students. Yeah. So that's the essence. That's the point. When you read a journal article, try to find areas which have not been explored by the researcher or by the writer. Yeah, that will help you find a research problem. The third one is replicate. Replicate means repeat. Do the same thing again. Yes, replicate. Yeah. In replication, you read a research and then you decide to repeat